Hi, I'm Ben. Welcome to my book corner. Today we're taking a look at a book that I purchased entirely based on what the cover art looks like. However, not long after I purchased it, also who drops into the comments occasionally, also highly recommended this in a Discord that I am also in. That book is Gay Werewolf by Tony Santarella. So this title came out in June of this year, 2023, and comes in at a quick 272 pages. As always, we will kick off with the story before looking at the characters, the world building, the presentation overall, and then my final thoughts at the end. So let's just jump straight in with this one. Okay, so this is the story of Brian. Brian is a werewolf who has moved to the big city to get away from his family. A few different reasons for this. Number one, they didn't take kindly to him dropping out of college. Obviously, they weren't aware that he'd been turned into a werewolf during this time. This is following some difficulty with them accepting the fact that he was gay as well. So he's gone to the city to make his name, to make a life of his own. Unfortunately, he's in his early 20s. And he's a college dropout, so there's not a huge amount initially out there, and he's in that sort of early life funk of I don't know what to do with my life and I don't know where to start. So he's very much staggering from day to day, going from getting up in the morning hungover to Grindr hookups, going to work, getting blackout drunk, coming home, rinse and repeat, and not really progressing with anything. Does have a couple of friends at work. They're Nik and Darby. We'll touch on them a little bit later on. And past that, he doesn't really have any connections in the city. Unfortunately as well, on 2 occasions, he accidentally kills people while he's in wolf form. And he doesn't realise this straight away. He doesn't remember it clearly. He only gets flashes of memory. However, a couple of days after he kills the second one, he has a visitor at the restaurant where he worked. This is where Tyler is introduced, and Tyler asks specifically to be served by him. And when Brian comes over and Tyler's talking to him saying, I know what you are, you're like me, we're both werewolves, I can help you, I know what you did. Which obviously puts Brian in a bit of a panic, and he says, look, I'm trying to help people, I'm here to help you, I'm trying to put a course together to help werewolves like you who don't have full control and are scared, so on and so forth. Here's my business card, just give me a call. And after a few days of the business card looking at him, or feeling like it was looking at him, Brian gives him a ring and he starts on a series of self-help exercises. So physically going out and going for a run early in the morning, which he hates, but who doesn't hate going running realistically? And he's given a load of almost like mantras to chant to help him meditate. Unfortunately, he thinks that meditation's pointless, so he sticks them all on his mirror and he does try them out, but they're nonsense such as you're an ocean in a drop, not a drop in an ocean. Let me know what that means in the comments below, please. That'd be grand. And after a few days, eventually he calls Tyler because, okay, fine, I'll come up to your house and we'll have a meeting and we'll see what we can do. And he goes up and he has a transformative experience. They do a proper workout and then they meditate afterwards, and with Tyler guiding him, he actually gets sort of snippets of inner peace a few times, and when he transforms next, he sees a difference in how he is. He has more control over his wolf form, and at this point he buys in totally. And at this point then it becomes more about, well, not only do you have to do all these things, but I'm trying to do this, so can you do this work for me? And also, you know, you need to be more assertive in life. You need to be more assertive with people, because you always take everything, you never give anything back. You need to stand up for yourself. And this is where the slide begins, because whilst initially at least that is not necessarily bad advice, there are always times when you should stand up for yourself. You shouldn't stand up and be belligerent all of the time. This begins to get noticed by his friends, gets him in trouble at work, to such a point where eventually he goes, you know what, I'm going to get away for a bit, and he goes on a getaway with Tyler and a group of Tyler's friends, where again some things happen and he stands up for himself. But unfortunately, as it becomes clear at this point, Tyler isn't interested in being stood up to himself, because he is the alpha, And when Brian tries to leave this situation, a showdown occurs towards the end of the book. It's a really, really solid story, and there's an interesting tale here about the dangers potentially in self-help, because unfortunately there is a sort of subset of influencers online at the moment that not so much prey on certain demographics, but there's a lot of young, vulnerable people out there who hear this advice and take it verbatim rather than adding context to it, because there is nothing wrong with going out and exercising every day to feel good about yourself, but it's about feeling good about yourself, which is the key thing. Not about looking good, it's about feeling good. And meditation is great for stilling the mind and helping calmness and all that sort of stuff, but everything has to be in context, and this points out that when you take the context away, then you can sometimes have a dangerous situation where people end up being almost indoctrinated, and that's what starts happening to Brian in here. It's a really solid story. There's some interesting twists and turns at the end as well, which I've not touched on as well, but overall this was a really easy read. I really enjoyed this one. Which fetches on to the main reason why I enjoyed this one, and that is the characters. Brian, who I've given the most time to already, is obviously the point of view character for this story, and we can all feel a little semblance of relation to somebody who's going through that bit of funk in their life, where it's just every day is like, ugh, and you don't know what you want to do, and you've no motivation to do anything, so you just go through the motions. And sometimes the stuff you see elsewhere is quite attractive, you know. The thoughts of I can be a better me is always an attractive thought. But not just that, he's very much stuck in a rut, going through the daily churn. And what's really interesting is when you compare him to, first of all, to Tyler, and secondly of all, to Nik in particular. So we'll start with Nik first. So Nik is his boss at the diner. Between himself, Nik and Darby, they all go out at a night after work. They all work every shift together. They're as close to friends as he's got, but because of his secret being a werewolf, he keeps them at bay because he feels like he can never truly belong and he can't trust people, understandably. Nik, on the other hand, is someone who's got her shit together. She's in charge of the restaurant at night. She runs the night shift. She's trusted with all that by the owner. She's very responsible. She's got her own place. She knows everyone in the city. She's studying to become a nurse. So she's juggling lots of different things. And the difference between her and Brian is actually really, really stark. Darby doesn't get quite as much personalisation. So Darby comes across very much as the theatre kid. He's up on stage, he sings, but he's in work, whereas Brian is very much trying to just get through the night with as minimal interaction as possible. He memorises people's names and their birthdays and the kids' names, and he's very personable. And it's a very stark contrast to Brian. And the big thing that starts fracturing their group is when he gets a boyfriend called Abe, who's always just there. They go out for the drink and he's just there, doesn't really talk. And there's some interesting stuff with Abe at the back end of the book. I'm not going to spoil anything here, but that's really interesting. And then you get Tyler, and Tyler in many ways isn't so much a personality, more a collection of buzzwords. Blue sky thinking, windows of opportunity. And he talks in this sort of almost corporate lingo constantly, but when his personality actually does come through, he's hyper aggressive and hyper controlling. And it's in such a way that quite often you'd see this termed as toxic masculinity, which it's a term I don't particularly like, but I could see it applying here. Especially towards the back end of the book, it becomes clear that actually he's not doing this to help people. He's doing this to fuel his own ego and gain control. And that is where this book is at its best, showing the contrast between especially Brian and Tyler and Brian and Nik. And the character work is really, really well done here. Whereas the character work is really strong, where this does fall a little bit is the world building. Now, part of that is down to the fact that this is set present day city life. most people will be familiar with that. Now, where the world building is quite good here is the sort of almost the pervasiveness of social media and influences in people's life. We're all aware of the Andrew Tates of the world. We're all aware of the dating apps like Tinder, Grindr, so on and so forth, and the reputation some of those apps have, rightly or wrongly, as well. And it's touched on things like digital detoxes and well-being and all these things to sort of clear our minds within such a cluttered world. But that being said, there is some world building in here. Things like seasonal changes that affect the way the restaurant works, things like that are in here. And there's enough here to help reinforce the story that's being told. It's just that is not the focus because this is so character centric. Nothing here is bad, it's just quite light in that regard. Presentation then. As mentioned, I bought this because of the cover, and the cover is amazing. It's really nice to see bold neon colours on a black background in general. I'm an 80s kid, neon's my thing, alright? I can't help it. But the really, really bright, almost garish lime green font with the wolf's head in the middle, which is what's actually used as the symbol for the Wolfpack TM online, on the black background really does jump out at you. And then you've got like the far more understated purples there. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous cover. And onto the writing style itself, and this is not a particularly high stakes story, and it's not an especially quick story either, even though it's under 300 pages. But what this is perfectly paced, as you feel the frustrations that Brian's going through, and you feel how those frustrations change and how his perceived needs change as well. Even though the needs really is just people, he does actually need a pack, he needs friends like we all do, but he doesn't realise that. And you feel the sort of alteration in perception throughout the course of the book, and you can tell there's going to be a butting of heads coming as you work through the book. It's not so much a build-up of tension, but it's a build-up of inevitability. And you can see it coming. It's really cleverly foreshadowed on several points. First of all, the issues with Darby and Nik, and then slightly later on the issues with Tyler as well. And it's exceptionally well paced. It's also a really easy read. I read this in a little over a day. I do have a little bit of spare time at the moment, but this was one that I actually didn't want to put down. I actually wanted to keep reading this one. And it's very rare that a book hooks me quite like the way this one did. I think it's exceptionally well written and perfectly paced. Pretty clear that I really like this book. This goes in A tier for me. Everything from the presentation on the actual cover, to the style of writing, to the really, really compelling character work that goes on with Brian in particular here. I think this is a really, really easy recommend book for me. It's almost like a popcorn book, because this is the sort of book that you want to keep reading. It's really, really, really good. I'd love to know what you think of this. Also, drop your favourite inspirational quotes in the comments below, and let's see if some of us can figure out what they actually mean. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you next time.